All right, be patient, everybody. We're kind of waiting for to see if Kurt Riegelman can join us online so we have a quorum.
Yeah, John, this is Kurt. I'm here, but can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Kurt.
Okay. I'm having a connection sort of mess up here. Do you mind running through the agenda and I'll just chime in?
Sure, I can run the agenda.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I've been on for 5 minutes and nobody could hear anything I was saying, so it's strange.
Okay, well, we're glad that you're there. So I guess I'll call the meeting to order. It's 4:07. And we'll do a roll call, I guess.
Rob Payne. Bob Bills.
John Nauman. Kurt, you still there?
Yes,
All
I'm here.
these icons, so does that count?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. All right, we have a quorum, so we'll proceed. Public participation. Getting a little bit of an echo here. Public participation enables the public.
Can you hear us, Kurt?
No, Marion,
Can you
not
hear us?
anymore. We can hear you, but not the room again.
Can you hear us? Now it's back.
Maybe I'll go get help.
All right, I guess we're putting this on hold for a minute.
Can you guys hear me at all? Because I'm not hearing anybody. I dialed back in because I might have been the echo.
Kurt, we're having some technical issues, evidently.
Aaron stepped out to try to get technical help.
Okay, good. So it's not totally my fault.
Well, just mostly. No, just kidding.
Well, that sounds about right.
If you were here, everything would be perfect, Kurt. I think I'm working. Yeah, a little bit of an echo.
Nate, SEE, can we call people into Teams? Even the smell says. Yeah. See my hands this way. Oh, you know.
Kurt, help has arrived. We hope we're going to be set.
Well, you just sounded much better than anything I've heard, so that's good.
Kurt, can you mute yourself?
I am muted.
We can hear you, Kurt.
That's weird because I'm hitting the mute button. Hang on. Let me try one thing.
Test, 1, 2, 3.
Test, 1, 2, 3. Sarah, can you hear us? Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Lovely. Okay.
And no echo either.
Yeah. Thought I would turn off my phone. Don't need that. All right. It is now 4:13, I think, thereabouts, and we will restart this meeting. And we already had the roll call, so we do have a quorum. So I'll read the public participation statement, item number 3. Public participation enables the public to address the commission about an item that is not on the agenda. If you wish to address the commission, please state your name and address for the record. The Arizona Open Meeting Law prohibits the commission from discussing or taking action on an item which is not listed on the prepared agenda. The commission members may, however, respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask the staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. Public comments should be limited to 3 minutes reading time. Do we have any public that would like to address the Water Commission out there? Okay, I guess we will proceed. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes for the meeting on August 15th. Any comments on the meeting? Minutes of the meeting from last time?
I move to approve as written.
Do we have a second?
I would like to ask a question on the minutes.
Ask away.
Okay. This perhaps is just a clarification. On page 4 of the printed document at the top, I did not understand the phrase SCADA controls needs for the process technology, and what is the lift for the facility to get at that point. I don't understand the term lift, and I don't recall that being used.
Is this better in terms of audio?
Kurt, we didn't pick that out completely.
Is this
Could you?
better in terms of background noise and audio?
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't recall. Not sure. I would have to go back through the recording to clarify that.
Okay, could we ask that that be clarified?
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah, I simply don't understand it as written, and so, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Do we have a second if we have that adjustment in the future?
Well, should I move that we approve the minutes with modification of that sentence? Okay, that would be a first.
Okay,
First
all in
approval.
favor?
Aye. I second it, and aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So we'll move on to new business item number 5. Item number 8, lead and copper service line inventory presentation by Jolene Montoya.
Good afternoon, Commission members. Jolie Montoya, Regulatory Compliance Manager for Water Services. I have Krista Snow, Drinking Water Laboratory Supervisor here, which she will be doing most of the presentation, but I'm also here to help.
Good afternoon. So we're here to talk about the lead and copper rule revision. Again, we were here, I believe, last year in the summer, maybe. There's an upcoming deadline, so we wanted to bring this to your attention again. So currently we're under the lead and copper rule. The lead and copper rule revision is on the proposed side. So currently we look at the action level of both lead and copper, and that is the 90th percentile of the data we get. And in the proposed, it will be that same 90th percentile, except the action level will be a bit lower to trigger extra requirements. So currently for lead, it's 15 parts per billion, and under the LCRR, that will be down to 10 parts per billion. There are also differences in monitoring. So currently, we focus on sites that are served by copper pipes that have lead solder. Usually those are built between 83 and 88. But then under the LCRR, we'll be choosing sites with a different priority, more focused on the material of the service line and less on copper with the lead solder. So more focused on lead, galvanized, such. The sample collection method is also different. So currently we test the first liter of water after it is sat in pipes for at least 6 hours, ideally longer overnight. And then under the LCRR, they want to look at the 5th liter. So you would take 5 consecutive liters of water after it is sat for at least 6 hours, and you would test that 5th liter. And the idea is to look at the water in the service line and not just the pipes in the home. Also under the LCRR, there's a school and childcare sampling requirement, which isn't currently under LCR. We need to test 20% of the elementary schools and 20% of childcare facilities every year. This does exclude newer buildings, so anything built after the 1st of January in 2014. So the first big step of the lead and copper rule revisions is creating the lead service line inventory. So this requires us to inventory all of our service connections, service lines on both the public side, so the city side, and the private side. So we consider the city side up to the water meter, and then from the water meter to the home is the private side. And we need to categorize these in four categories of lead, non-lead, unknown, and then galvanized requiring replacement. For non-lead, ADEQ recommends that we specify what it actually is, so copper, plastic, galvanized. We've tried to capture the actual material instead of just saying non-lead. And that initial inventory is due next month, October 16th. So far, we hired 5 AmeriCorps interns that did a lot of this work looking at records review. So this started in January of 23. Mostly they looked at as-built drawings to find actual materials. We've also used information from our field crews, our distribution crews. We have several people that have been there for many years that have just a really good understanding of the system. And know just certain neighborhoods, what they are. Also, they've been able to check from meter boxes. I guess in some cases you can check in the meter box and know what the material is, but in some cases you can't because they have an extension out from there. In the future, for the unknowns that we have, we probably will need to look into potholing, especially on the customer side, because ADEQ requires only 1 point of verification on the city side and then 2 points of verification on the customer side. So we can get one of those from the meter box, but one has to be closer to the home. Yes.
Quick question, can you define potholing?
Pretty, pretty much digging a hole in a yard. So there's there's a couple different kinds. There's actual like physical excavation to get down to the pipe to be able to see the material. There's some that you could use water jetting. We're still looking into what we need to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, pretty much excavation with as little as possible.
Can you do that from the inside of the pipe?
I don't believe
I
they
don't think so.
support those methods right now.
No.
There are some imaging methods
Yeah.
available, but ADEQ hasn't approved those. So ADEQ is using 120 water. So ADEQ is paying 120 water to be the portal for uploading all this data. We aren't paying them as a city, but we need to use the 120 water portal. So we upload our data there, and then that portal will have the public facing map that's required. So we will give them all the data, and the map will be available through ADEQ's portal with 120 water. This is just an infographic on the system of creating that service line inventory. Here's an example of the map that should be generated by 120 Water. For each address, there should be 2 different sides. So you have your city side and then the private side. All those question marks are unknowns in this example. This isn't Flagstaff, just an example. But ideally, it would show the at least non-lead, lead, galvanized, or unknown for each address and each side. So the biggest takeaway from this is that we will have unknowns for our inventory, and that's okay. We've been working with ADEQ the past couple years, and they have stressed that it is very much okay to have unknown service lines. And again, many of these that we have are on the customer side because of that requirement of 2 points of verification. The thing about any unknowns is that we are required to notify all water users if they have an unknown. So even if one side is known and one is unknown, we need to notify each individual user if they have some unknown portion of their line. And that's within 30 days of that submittal on October 16th. And we're currently working on having more outreach and more information available to the public prior to that deadline.
Can you say what form that notification will take, or what form that information will take?
So currently we're working with the Public Information's Office and doing a small blurb press release to let everybody know that this is going on. We have this inventory and a few highlights about the lead and copper rule revision, and then just to kind of let them know that if you haven't known, you will be expected to get a notice sometime in October.
And the notices, did we decide those will be by mail, email, combination?
Yeah.
Okay, combination it sounds like. This is a preliminary look at our service line inventory. This isn't absolutely finalized. We are still working on it. But you can see we have around 50% completely known, and then about 26% completely unknown, and then the breakdown is there as well. So that was all for the lead and copper rule revisions. We also are looking at the lead and copper rule improvements. So this was new proposed rules from November of 2023 that is not officially adopted yet, but is expected to be very soon. And it's similar to LCRR, except it builds on it a little bit, has a little bit more requirements. So one example is for sampling. They don't just want the 5th liter of the water in the home, but they want the 1st and 5th liter sample in the home. And then they also have just stricter timelines for replacing any unknowns or lead service lines. And yeah, again, we're expecting this to be adopted soon, but not officially yet. Moving forward, we've slowed work on the actual inventory just so that we can focus on the data that we have and get it all ready to submit. And then also work on those notifications to customers with unknowns and the sampling plans that will be required with that. We're continuing to include information to the public, public outreach, as Julian mentioned, and then also we have included info in the consumer conference report this year. And we're also required to update the inventory in an ongoing matter for years to come, just as service lines are encountered during normal work with distribution crews. If they find updates and differences, they need to update that in the system. Here's some links for you to get more information, but otherwise, are there questions?
Robin?
Did I hear you correctly to say that we have over 50% of the service lines are unknowns?
A little bit under 50%.
Okay, so 47? Yeah, and did I hear correctly this time that there's a requirement that those be replaced if it can't be determined what they are?
No, it's not going to be replaced. We have to notify people that we don't know what it is, but we will continue to work to find out what they are. So we will, because at some point the inventory will be as complete with the ongoing new construction and stuff. So that's what ADQ and EPA is striving for, is that we'll actually know, but it'll just take time.
Do you have standard methodologies for identifying the materials?
ADQ has guidance. There's the scratch test, there's magnets. They say that a lot of the knowns we have are just simply based on the lead ban from 1988. So we can say that we definitely know it's not lead, but then we've been working towards knowing if it's copper, PVC from there. So all our stuff we use is taken from ADQ for field verification.
I see, thank you.
The biggest barrier to knowing the service line material is just access.
So just, can
You
you hear
mentioned-
me? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ron.
I'm sorry, you mentioned that you use as-built drawings. Have you done any sampling to know what percentage of the time the as-built drawing is correct, actually matches what was built?
We have not. No, there have been a couple instances where our distribution supervisor has looked at the material and seen that there were discrepancies. But again, that's part of this whole ongoing inventory and building it and making it better as we go. So only a couple instances that we've found that.
Thank you.
So
Has there been a correlation between what the service or delivery pipes are and lead you've tested for in the water? Have you had hits when you have lead service lines or lead solder in a service line or a residential line? You know what I'm saying? You're testing and you pick up lead, and does that match what you have for the service line? I mean, or vice versa, you have a lead line, but you don't pick up anything. Do you see the question?
I wouldn't say we've seen correlation. So I only test at 30 homes within the city, and we don't have any lead service lines. We have found a handful of times goosenecks or lead connectors, but I don't believe any of those sites have lined up with the sites that I've tested. And then when those are encountered, they are replaced.
Okay. Is there currently any federal funding and this is putting additional demands on your department, is there any federal funding for this type of work?
In a manner, the ADEQ has received funding from EPA to help, but they've been using it for the communities that are like 3,300 and less. So the smaller communities that have to do this, because every water system in the state has to do this, just not municipalities. So most of the money has been going towards that. I think once the inventory is done, they might reevaluate and see what else they can do with it.
You seem quite comfortable with this whole thing. For those of us who aren't directly involved, this seems like a massive undertaking. Are you comfortable that water services is in a good position and the community is in a good position? Are we going to have some surprises here or gotchas, or is this somewhat perfunctory? You're just having to go through go through the steps?
Yeah, I feel very comfortable with it in that we haven't encountered any lead service lines. I think this is more just following
Yeah.
the requirements.
So ADEQ has kind of taken the stance, since we're a newer state even, that there's probably going to be proving we have lead instead of, or we're proving we don't have lead instead of proving what lead we have.
So quick-
Go ahead, Kurt.
Robert, so, yeah, quick, so, okay, so we're going to be notifying, I would say, a material number of customers that they have, I guess, uninventoried connections, and there may or may not be lead. Lead is a pretty scary word. Do we, as part of the communication, sort of outline a plan of, and we're going to prosecute these sectors within these timelines so people can get an understanding of when they will know the answer to that? Because I think that would spool some people up, especially parents. So is there some sensitivity or way to give them, basically the work plan when we're going to close this out?
So currently for the communications plans, we're taking our lead from EPA and ADEQ because they have a template already listed on their website that we're going to use and modify that has language to better communicate that this is why, this is what's happening. It's going to be unknown, but and I don't think that one has a timeline, and frankly, we don't have a timeline because we have to figure out funding for potholing or what we're going to do for steps. We know of other communities that have tried to use customer verification as like a second point, but they have not had very good luck with it. But we still consider that to maybe be a useful tool, a tool to try and get a second point of verification on customer side. But they are very focused on just getting people in with the inventory and not giving a whole lot of guidance of what types of things we can use. That answer your question, Kurt?
Not completely. I guess where I'm trying to get at is we will have various methodologies at our disposal, but we think the timing to figure this out is X. So that people aren't like, oh my God, I got this. I mean, I imagine there's going to be a lot of emails and phone calls. Wait, I just got this letter. It says I may or may not have lead. When do we find that out?
Yes.
I think that's going to be a big question. I would have that question.
So that's why we decided to do this preemptive news release too before we start out the letter, so people can kind of understand that this is why we're sending that letter. And then we're working with the communications team to make sure the letter satisfies or hopefully helps at ease. But I understand that, yes, there's going to be concerns about lead, no lead, especially, and that's one of the things that brought up. We have actually done testing in the schools with ADEQ quite a few years ago, so that we have some data from the schools at least. But yeah, that is a concern, and we're preparing for it.
We are also trying to include the message that it's highly unlikely that we are to encounter any lead service lines since we have these distribution crew members who have worked here for years and haven't encountered anything except for connecting pieces.
Okay.
Will something to that effect be included in the communication?
Yes. I believe so.
If somebody's worried, you have a resident who's really worried, especially if they have little children or something, and could you do testing fairly quickly, or are you set up to do sampling and testing?
We're not set up in-house to do testing, and actually ADEQ has said not to do a sequential testing. That is one of the methods. They say that should be like the very last resort. So we would still have to come up with a plan of what we would do in that case if we would go and take a sample and then send it off to the lab, or how that would work.
I can see that coming up, so that might be something you want to prepare for, so.
Yeah, it sounds like 47% of the households are going to get this letter. Is that correct?
It's not necessarily households, it's everybody. It's all commercial, industrial households. We have to inventory every single water user we have in the city of Flagstaff. So most of them will probably households, but there may be some businesses in that sort of locations.
Okay, but my point is, it's a large number of people, and some percentage of those people, to Kurt's point, will probably, you know, hair on fire. Um, it
That's why
sound-
we're here.
Well, you can tell us, but the bigger issue is going to be when the phone starts ringing. And is there any kind of plan at all? I guess you're developing that, but I guess we would suggest that you work hard on that plan to how you will address those calls.
Yeah, that's why we kind of slowed down on the inventory because we've been focusing so much on trying to get to where we could be. And so now we're switching gears to try and work on the communications and what we're going to do moving forward with that.
Yeah, I think clearly you're gonna want something on the website for sure. Sort of a background and here's what's happening and why and what we expect, right? You might even want to do an editorial about that in one of the papers or something, because yeah, I'm just worried, while this seems like a very perfunctory regulatory process, that word lead hits people and they are going to be very concerned. And you're going to get a reaction that you may not have expected in terms of the number of people, not necessarily the reaction, but, and that could potentially swamp the system and or make us look unresponsive in terms of the speed to get in front of people. So I think whatever you can do to provide context and coverage before those letters go out, website, papers, something, mailers in the bills, whatever. But it's just, because these are the kind of things that where you think it's like this, everybody's pretty comfortable that everybody that knows about this is comfortable that we don't have a problem. But, but the average citizen is not that person and is made to start to really go crazy. So just cautionary tale.
Thank you. We'll take that into consideration. We also do have stuff for our information from the lead and copper rule that has already been in place for a couple decades and the data from that. So we have lead information in our CCNR every year. So it's not, we have some already information out on our website and publications.
Thank you.
Trying to think of how a customer might respond. For some, the impulse might be to call the city. Others, they may call their plumbers. Is the local plumbing community kind of clued into this, and might be worth letting them know that this is about to hit, and they may have these questions as well, and give them some guidance on how to deal with it.
No, we haven't reached out to them, but that's a good thinking. Thank you.
One last question from me. Do we monitor water pH pretty carefully in delivered water to make sure it's pH 7 or higher when it's delivered?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, because it's a major function of how much lead's going to be in the water if it gets into the acidic grain. So, any other questions? Okay, we'll proceed on to. Are you guys? Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. That was a great presentation. We'll move on to item B, MS4 Stormwater Management Plan presentation. Jolene Montoya.
You get to see me again. All right, so this one is Stormwater Management Plan. This has to do with our municipal separate storm sewer system permit that we have with ADEQ. This is nothing to do with the floodplain or with like stormwater, but they do help out with this permit. So we have a notice of intent to comply with ADEQ's general permit. That's how we comply to have our MS4 permit. We are a space 2, which is also called a small designation. That gives us authorization to discharge stormwater and certain non-stormwaters into the Rio de Flag. So this is essentially protection for urbanized areas. So not everything in city limits is actually protected under the MS4. NAU has their own MS4 permit. The county has their own MS4 permit. And there are areas that are not inhabited that are not included in this as well, that are within the city limits. So it's a rough map, kind of hard to read. Sorry. But everything in the dark line that's green is what we are responsible for to take care of. As you can see, there's some white pockets. Those are ones that are county islands or NAU's not exactly white, and then the other green areas, city limits, but that's not where we're responsible for the MS4 permit. So part of this permit, we have to develop a stormwater management plan. So this is pretty much to make sure we don't have any pollutants, do our best for any illicit discharge oils, things of that nature. We do our best to inform the public and to work with construction companies, things of that nature. This plan is what we tell ADEQ we're going to do to try and help mitigate any of these things going in the MS4. So as these requirements, we have to list our protected surface water, which is the Rio de Flag. That's the only one we have. That's a WOTUS. It's a water of the United States. That's the only one we're responsible for. So it also includes a stormwater system that includes all our outfalls, culverts, things of a map, which in our GIS layers that we have. It also has to have a description of what practices we're going to do to comply with what ADEQ has in their general permit. In this newest permit, there's also characterization monitoring that's never been in it. Usually there's only monitoring for any impaired or outstanding Arizona waters, which are throughout the state, but we have never had to actually sample any water going into the Rio de Flag until this past permit. And then as part of this, we also have to evaluate this program every year and then identify all the personnel that are responsible for bringing this MS permit to life. So this is our organization chart, and these are multiple people and organizations within Water Services that help make us compliant with our MS4 permit. So as a regulatory compliance manager, obviously the whole of the permit, our SCADA information systems help with the GIS part of it. Our communication with our management analyst helps us with the communication part, and we have a couple people in stormwater and engineering that do the site reviews, plan reviews, construction inspections, and things of that nature that also help. And then as for the past couple of years now, we have a stormwater collections crew that also is part of this permit, that help with this permit, I should say. So as this permit, there are actually 6 minimum control measures, MCMs. I'll briefly go through them. So MCM 1 and 2 kind of going hand in hand. They're public outreach, they're public involvement. So these are things of how we say we get out to the public of the importance of not polluting the Rio de Flag, how to keep it clean. We have the Friends of the Rio, the stream team, Adopt a Stream. Those are big people that help keep all the watersheds clean. And we have some fun YouTube videos. If you've never seen them, I highly recommend watching them to get people to understand what the things they do that can affect water going into the Rio de Flag. Number 3 is a big one. So this is the illicit discharge detection and elimination program. So we have our mapping of all our drainages, outfalls, things of that nature. And we also have an enforcement response plan that we use to control that. For the permit, we have to log any illicit discharges that are submitted to us or we see, and then we have to give them to ADEQ every year, tell them which ones we investigated, what we did, what we found, saw, what it was. We also have to visually inspect, usually in dry weather, 20% of our outfalls that we have recorded to make sure there's no debris, there's no trash. If there is, we can give our stormwater collections crew work orders to go and help clean that up. Annually, I go around to city staff and I give a presentation to let them know about all these things, the MCMs, the illicit discharge, so they can be eyes and ears for the city as well, like trash truck drivers, our Parks and Rec. So when they're out, they can see things, they can also report it back to us and help us out that way. We also have to report to ADEQ any non-filers. So anybody who may need a different kind of permit with ADEQ that if we find them, we have to report them to ADEQ when we find them. As part of this program, we have a hotline. So there is a number that goes to a voicemail that one of our stormwater inspectors will answer and follow up on. We also have an email that people can send in pictures. We figured this would be a good way, instead of just calling, people take pictures with their phones, and it could be a good way they just email them off if they ever find anything. There are, like I said earlier, some exceptions to our allowable non-stormwater discharges. And so hydrant flushing is one of them, flushing our new mains, landscape irrigation, which I think our conservation crew probably curtails that more than anything. But it is allowable for the landscape irrigation to go in the curb and gutter and down into the MS4. So the next one is our construction activity stormwater runoff. So the stormwater inspector under Ed's group does a lot of work with this. She does a lot of the inspections, does a lot of education. She keeps the inventory of construction sites, make sure the sediment control, BMPs are all in place. Doug in Ed's group too does the plan reviews. So, and we all have the ordinances that says we can tell people what they need to, what they can and cannot do for their construction site. And then the post-construction, we use our plan review, the CFO process to go back out to make sure they did what they were supposed to do. Also do routine inspections after there's been a storm with a new construction project that's been done, just to make sure everything's working like it said it was supposed to. And last but not least, our pollution prevention and good housekeeping for our municipal operations. So this involves like our street sweeping, keeping our roads clean, to keep chemicals and such covered, storage inside, so there's no way for like leaking buckets to get into a drainage, and just removal of waste with our collections crew to be able to take that out, make sure everything is running correctly with the culverts and things of that nature. And we also have an inventory of our facilities and then do regular inspections. As I said, part of this new permit, we had characterization monitoring. So we had to complete the sampling within the first 3.5 years, which the deadline is March of 2025. There was a selection of 3 outfalls. They had to be representative of commercial, industrial, and residential. We had to get samples within the first 30 minutes of a storm that would produce 0.1 inches of discharge from that outfall. And then we had to submit a DMR. And then I'm happy to say we are complete. I've heard from ADQ, not everybody is complete. So we are done with our characterization monitoring. I'm happy to say we had very little detections of certain metals and none of VOCs, SOCs of that nature. As part of the program assessment, we have to do the annual evaluation. We have to keep records, make our swamp, the stormwater management plan available to public. It's on our website. And then every year we have to send in an annual report to ADEQ. It's pretty much fiscal year. All the activities we did for the MCMs is what we report to ADEQ, so they know we're still adhering to the permit. So why I'm here today, we just had an audit from ADEQ a couple of weeks ago, and it was found that we were not providing the public an opportunity to participate in the review, revisions, and update of the swamp. So I thought, as a first step, I would bring it to the Water Commission so you guys would know, what the swamp actually was. So we were going to be working on how to better engage the public, so they have a chance to weigh in on this swamp, and feel free to make any revisions as long as they're within the purveyance of us and adhering to the permit of ADEQ. And with that, any comments or questions about the swamp?
Was that the sole comment about the swamp that ADEQ made?
No, there were a couple others. We got the final inspection report. We haven't had any follow-up actions. I'm expecting we probably will have a notice to correct deficiencies. Besides this one, there were a couple others that we need to work on. So there's a couple other things.
Can you describe any of those?
So one of them is the inventory and inspections of the municipality facilities that my predecessor said we had one. I could not find one. So now I am having to make the inventory and then work on an inspection schedule for all our municipality facilities. And then that's the other big one I remember off the top of my head.
Are you aware of whether Flagstaff has an issue with illegal dumping? You know, people dumping waste oil down sewer drains, or is that commonplace at all?
So according to our logs, not really. For the last year when I put in the annual report, we only had three complaints come in, and one of them actually ended up in a notice of violation to a company to be able to clean up what they had going on their site. I think there probably may be some, and that's probably what we could, I'm starting to work with our communications team of seeing of different ways we can do the public outreach and public involvement. I know that there's a lot of good things going on, but there's some things we could probably do better.
Thank you.
Is the list of chemicals that you test for and whatever other stuff you may be testing for listed somewhere on the city website or
So when this-
ADQ or?
In the swamp, there's a list of everything I was mandated to test for the characterization monitoring.
Herbicides and insecticides part of the list?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I guess you're off the hook.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Moving along to item C, Stormwater Management Design Manual, Ed Schenk.
So Ed's over here.
But you're not Ed Schenk, he's over there.
No, he's over there sitting down. Good afternoon, guys, commissioners. Doug Slover, Stormwater Project Manager.
Thank you.
So this is just a quick one, no presentation. We just wanted to inform you that we are going to release the final draft of the Stormwater Manual to the general public for comment period. It's been in the process for about 3 years. We had technical peer review earlier this year, lasted about 6 weeks and took about 4 months to address all those comments. And now we're ready to release it to general public. So here we go.
Is that posted on the website for the city?
Not yet. Want to tell you first, and then we'll do that. General public, we have a mailer, go by email. We'll also put it on the website.
Super.
Quick.
Just quick
Get all-
question. What are the components of that? So if I'm get the email saying we're posting that, what should I expect to see when I look at that?
What do you say?
Maybe I'll
Can-
jump in here real quick. So it's Ed Schenk, Stormwater Section
Yeah.
Director. So just a little bit of background. Stormwater Management Design Manual is the manual for developers within the city of Flagstaff. So it is the rule set for the development within the city of Flagstaff. And that generally follows city code under chapter 12 and chapter 13. Well, no, chapter 13 is more LID manual, but it generally follows chapter 12 as well as the associated city code for engineering design standards. Our last update to the Stormwater Management Design Manual was in 2009. And the need for this update is, if you read the existing manual, it is old. So if you're looking at it, so for example, for our rainfall distribution, so if you are an engineer and you're looking at it and you're trying to design your detention basin or your outfalls, you're looking at that, and our rainfall table is from NOAA Atlas 2. So that's our rainfall atlas from forever ago. Right now, NOAA is up to Atlas 14. So there's a little bit of a gap there, as you can tell, from 2 to 14. 14 is actually a dynamic document. 2 is way back in the days where you literally had a printout physical copy of a table. NOAA Atlas 14 today is actually constantly reviewed and revised by NOAA. So you actually go onto a website, you can click with the map clicker anywhere in Flagstaff, and you'll get a personalized rainfall distribution. So that's just one example, but there's a whole lot of other calculations and equations and sections that were very outdated and very much obsolete that would have been updated. And how we updated that, we did have a consultant on board, one of the local engineering firms, and how they updated it was by looking at other code throughout the state. So a lot of it was pulled, and Doug can speak to this more than I can, but a lot of it is pulled from ADOT, Maricopa County, as well as Coconino County, which it's kind of circular. We all work together. So that, a lot of these are kind of copy and pasted from different county, city, state. drainage design manuals, and they slowly through time all improve as there's better science to go with it. So nothing in this is controversial. I don't think there's anything that's really a big policy change. Really, if anything, this brings us back into line with what Coconino County does, as well as the state and federal agencies that we see in town, the biggest one being ADOT. So it's getting us to be back on par, if you will, so that we don't have a deprecated stormwater management manual. And with that, I've spoken way too much. I'm going to give it back over to Doug. Doug is the project manager on this one, so I don't want to steal his thunder.
Thank you. That was super helpful because for a minute I thought we were telling everybody how we manage the stormwater system. It's like, wow, that's going to be a lot, but this is really code for construction and development. Got it. Thank you so much.
Were there any areas of particular controversy or comment during the initial comment period?
A few big ones were methodologies, like would we permit certain or specific methodologies? Green and AMP was one. Input parameters,
I'm sorry, what was that first one?
green and amped, so it's a method we determine flows from infiltrations. So there's different methodologies we use, rational method, SES method, green and amp would be another method. So those kind of comments of what does the field of engineering say with regards to input parameters on drainage design?
One of the factors I had been aware of from the past was a design standard to, for new parking lots, that type of thing, that they have a detention basin for up to a 1-inch rainfall. Is that still the applicable number? And
so when we do detention basin designs, there's a few different protocol we can go through. There is a 1-inch LID retention component that got implemented in 2009. That won't change. What would change is, for an example, when you size that detention basin pre versus post, the input parameters or the site development size that would be limited. So you can only use the rational method for 40 acres. If it was a 60-acre site, what other methodologies could you use? So that 1-inch, that's part of the LID manual, that didn't change.
I see, thanks.
Does this document interact with floodplain determination and, with the current changes we had in Flagstaff and basic zoning?
There's quite a bit of overlap there, but the stormwater design management manual is more for development and building the infrastructure, how we go about it. You give you parameters for how to build a channel, what your maximum slopes could be. So if you were doing flood conveyance stuff, there would be components of the stormwater manual that would be addressed, as well as say was a FEMA regulated floodplain. They would overlap quite a bit.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you much.
Thanks.
Thanks much for the update. It was good. Okay, now we will move on to item D, reclaim water rate options for consideration. Aaron Young.
Good evening, Vice Chair and Commission members and Chairman Riegelman. Online, Aaron Young, Water Resources Manager, and I'm bringing back for discussion a topic that was raised by the City Council during our wastewater reclaim water rate presentations. Council did adopt water and wastewater rates on July 3rd, and along with that, reclaimed water was maintained at 35% of potable, the reclaimed water rates. So those were updated as well. On March 25th, I believe, and April 2nd, I believe, the dates are in your agenda packet. Council elected to not revisit whether to change that policy. But they did request that we have a discussion soon after to dig in a little deeper into reclaimed water rate setting, whether or not to change this policy. So we're kicking that off here tonight. I will introduce a roadmap / timeline for having this discussion with the commission. We'll go over the first of 4 presentations on this. The first one tonight being just sharing some facts about reclaimed water, trends that we can expect to see over the next 10 years before we open it up for discussion and leave it at the next steps for at our next meeting in October. The timeline, at tonight's meeting, as I mentioned, we'll talk about reclaimed water facts and trends over the next 10 years, and that will inform an October discussion where the commission can determine guiding principles for creating and delivering Flagstaff reclaimed water. Or I should just say for maintaining the rates discussion. In November, the idea would be to hone in on 3 practical pricing models for city council consideration, and then December finalizing that down to 2. So staff, our director, Shannon Jones, did meet with Chairman Riegelman to kind of help outline this timeline. As I mentioned, on July 3rd, City Council did adopt rates, and I've provided the rate sheet for reclaimed water here. Highlighted in yellow is just showing that rates are set at 35% of potable. Where you see a 75% of potable, that pertains to where there was a main extension funded as part of that agreement getting reclaimed water in the past, probably from the 90s. And there is the case of 87% of the commercial rate for golf courses for off-peak use. So we have very limited storage. We have a storage tank at Buffalo Park, and that is actively being drawn down during the day in June, hot June and July, when everyone wants that water for irrigation. We appreciate the off-peak takers, and then we have the takers that don't have storage at their locations, like some of the golf courses do, where they have lakes and they can fill those at night, for example. So this is where we're at today. So just talking about what are some of the different options, just to get us thinking about, well, what else could we do? We're at percent of potable now, but rates, the interesting thing with reclaimed rates is there's no legal requirement to base them off of cost of service like we have on water and wastewater, which makes reclaimed water unique. We could transition to a cost of service based model, can consider tiered rates, classifications, different classifications than we have today, maybe seasonal demands, winter versus summer, considering maybe the end use and whether there should be different rates, such as for those that are providing water for public use, such as at our parks, versus private users. There are also ideas that we've heard from the commissioners, such as reclaimed water markets. Some of the common drivers for setting rates: water conservation, uses that support the quality of life, or that support the environment. Just some of these facts. Reclaimed water since the 1990s, since our system built around Flagstaff for delivering high volume users, that reclaimed water offsets potable by about 20% annually. We have about 70 customers, and that's again since the mid 1990s. We've consistently provided 2,000 acre feet of water a year. We produce about 6,000 acre feet of potentially A+ treated effluent. So we're not using it all every year, but we're using it on the 4th bullet, basically all of it in the summer months during irrigation demand, but then we have maybe 5 MGD available in the shoulder months. We do have an agreement, the Bow and Arrow agreement, to discharge a weekly average of 200 gallons a minute from both the water reclamation facilities to support wetlands along the Rio de Flag. So we have that commitment. It's about 320 acre feet a year. Our irrigation use, or I'm sorry, our reclaimed water users include watering at a lot of our city parks, schools, within medians. We have snowmaking, golf courses. And we also use reclaimed water. We have loadout stations where it's used for dust suppression. It was a community initiative to treat water to class A+ in the 1990s. And that is the highest class offered under ADEQ rules. And just showing graphically the difference in water demands between just monthly. So you can see during the shoulder months, the gray is commercial use, so that is largely Snowbowl. And the green in the summer months is largely the golf course demand. And then the blues are smaller classifications, residential, schools, parks, etc. And then you can also see the total reclaimed water produced. This is from 2019. That is the product of treated wastewater, we call it our effluent. When that enters our distribution system, the purple pipe system, it's disinfected. And that's, I believe that is our line for then calling that water reclaimed water when it enters the distribution system. We release treated effluent to the Rio de Flag. That when there's no demand for it, it goes to the Rio de Flag as per our ZIPD's permit that Jolene and her team manage. I think you're familiar with the purple pipe direct delivery system, but providing a map. It is almost a completed loop. One of the capital projects that we've wanted to do for a while would be to loop the system. It just is more efficient for operations. I did provide to you a capital improvement list. It totals, if we could do everything we wanted to, this is what we presented during the rate study. It's about $70 million over 10 years. The approved CIP through the city council budget, I believe is 11 million over 10 years. So I have a slide on that. But the purple pipe system again was constructed to provide water to large irrigation users. So Northern Arizona University golf courses, and then the parks that are along the system. We've talked about maybe expanding it to other users, but the cost, per mile of pipe for the much smaller demands on the system just hasn't penciled out. And we'd have to increase storage quite a bit in order to meet new demands on the system if there's summer demands. Have some slides here showing 2010 to 2019, just how consistent our reclaimed water delivery to reuse ratio is to discharge to the Rio de Flag. So water discharge to the Rio de Flag annually is shown in the light blue, with our water delivered in purple pipe in the dark blue. And then I have the numbers, the volumes in acre feet per year below. Some of these materials might help you with the next couple meetings. I put in a bunch of graphs and statistics and such. This chart is showing in 2019, again, we see this is a very common trend every year. The upper blue line is the total actually treated effluent, the reclaimed water produced in million gallons per day. We commonly see a spike around February or March when we have snow melt, and snow melt does get into the sewer system and is treated and could potentially become reclaimed water. Otherwise, we're producing about 5 million gallons a day. The green line is showing the volume discharged to the Rio de Flag, which is just subtracting the committed reclaimed water use demand that enters the system for delivery. So the difference in July between the black line and the blue line is about 1 MGD. That would be the water that is committed to the Rio de Flag under our bow and arrow agreement. So as we think in the future about DPR and such, we don't have much water in the summer months for DPR, for example. That's where IPR can be a nice alternative because we can store it whenever we have it. Just some slides from the October City Council meeting, the joint work session with Water Commission. We had a slide showing our current, at that time, current 5-year financial outlook. The cash in is about $1 million a year, cash out about $1 million a year. The revenues do cover our cost of service if you draw the line at water entering the purple pipe distribution system. The revenues in cover our costs to provide water through that system, not considering too much operational capital or any of the larger capital projects. I have in the slides here the approved 10-year capital improvement program, which does total just under $12 million. Again, I provided a handout showing our entire capital needs on the reclaim system. In October, Stantec presented the funding scenarios. We had these for water, wastewater, and reclaimed water. Council, you might remember they went with the alternative funding option for water and wastewater and reclaimed water. I just wanted to provide what if reclaimed was fully funded at that 70 million over 10 years. Rates would have needed to go up 450% for those 70 customers in order to cover the cost of those capital projects. So I just thought this was interesting and it came up in another meeting earlier today. So I thought I'd bring this in. Just some numbers to those percents. A comparison of the full funding scenario to the others. I just took these directly out of those slides from October. Another fact we wanted, oh yes, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, just a quick one. I may have blinked at the wrong time. Do we have this? Do we have this presentation available to us now?
You will have it after this meeting. Marion can send it out.
Okay, I'm not good enough to absorb all this in
sorry.
One sitting. So thank you.
Good
Yeah,
thing we have
yeah.
four-
Please
four
continue.
meetings. One thing we wanted to show is where Flagstaff lies in terms of our dollars per acre foot compared to other communities. So this chart is showing on the bottom service population. Flagstaff is right at about 70,000. And then the dollars per acre foot of our reclaimed water, which is just over $400 an acre foot. So you'll see Buckeye has a much smaller service population, but they're the highest on this chart at over $1,000 an acre foot for reclaimed water. As an example, Tucson is pretty high, over $800 an acre foot, obviously a much larger service population. So just some other information. I'm almost through with my slides before we open it for discussion. Future considerations, where is reclaimed water sort of heading in the industry? And reclaimed water is becoming more of a valuable resource where water scarcity is a major pressure on future water supplies. So thinking of reclaimed water and all water as one water is a big industry shift, I would say. And one water opens up so many different opportunities for basically it's recognizing that within a community there are all these needs for water and matching the water quality with the end use and treating water as one water. Um, we've talked about in Flagstaff, just can we expand the purple pipe? Um, again, there are limitations to doing so, which we could talk about if it's relevant. There's IPR options, so for through surface water augmentation, such as in Upper Lake Mary. We've also talked about recharging the sea aquifer within city limits. Um, Indirect potable reuse, we could do that today without additional treatment, but we've talked about doing that with additional treatment. That could be where the industry takes us, just through regulations on PFAS. So we may need to treat it within the next 10 years, and then all the way to direct potable reuse, which I know you're aware. ADEQ is on track to adopt rules for direct potable reuse in Arizona called advanced water purification in early 2025. Um, so that's kind of industry horizon next 10 years, and we're back to the discussion timeline, and I can turn it over to our chair.
Any questions?
We do have a public comment. We do have a public that wants to comment.
All right, let's have public speak to us first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission and city staff. Joe Galley, 101 West Route 66 here in Flagstaff. I'm the Senior Advisor of Public Policy at the Greater Flagstaff Chamber of Commerce. This morning, we held our monthly Business Advocacy Division meeting, and we asked our City Water Resources staff to be with us, and Mac and Aaron Young were in the room along with a few others. Thank you, Aaron and staff, for sharing this presentation with our business community and for updating us on kind of the path forward here, the schedule for the next few months. We, of course, participated heavily in the discussion over 18 months, both publicly and one-on-one with staff and mayor and council on the rate study that was just adopted here at the end of the city's fiscal year. And so we're kind of acutely in tune with what's going on and the political machinations, if you will, that council has directed staff to be back in front of both the Water Commission and council on this idea of how we move forward with reclaimed. Should we keep it together with wastewater and water as we just adopted the rate hike and the rate hike package, or do we decouple it? And those are questions that you'll entertain here in coming months in commission meetings, and then of course, mayor and council. I just wanted to get on record tonight and say that we're watching this very closely because, as Erin noted in her presentation, there are, I think, 70. I would assume those are all private. Erin, maybe some are public. Maybe the school district and others. Erin can comment after I finish on the breakdown. But there's a number of private users, clients, if you will, of city water services that purchase. And we're concerned, I think you probably know, costs have been increasing exponentially over the last few years here in our community. They continue to go up on the labor side. And so we're just here to monitor the process and maybe to offer some comment when you get to the policy decisions down the road about decoupling reclaimed from its existing space in the water services rate structure. But wanted to, again, be on record. We're I guess I could say we're a little concerned because we're okay with how it is currently. We understand reclaim rates have just gone up and they will go up on the sliding scale in coming years under the rate package. But, and that adds costs to our member users who are purchasing this product from the city. So whenever we have escalating costs, we just get a little nervous because we know what that means for the general public. We know that that means costs are going up to the general public in the terms of the end product that's provided. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'm sure I'll be back here, Mr. Chair and members of the Water Commission, and we'll continue to get updates from our water services staff over at the chamber. And thank you for your service. Any questions for me?
Well, we really appreciate your input, and we'll need that input in the future to make good decisions. So I'm glad you're here.
Absolutely. Have a great evening.
Actually, I would add to John's comments and invite you, if you have concepts about what the pricing policy should be, we'd be happy to see those and not wait for the actual decision-making meeting, because by then it's usually too late. If you have proposals for what a guideline should be for a pricing policy, we'd be happy to entertain those and review those.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, I have just been made aware of this discussion that it'll take place here in the coming months last week, and made it a point to spend time with you this evening to let you know we're watching. Of course, last week we scheduled city staff for our business advocacy division meeting this morning to get the full update. We'll continue to engage them. I am not a reclaimed water expert, but on behalf of the business community, I am a cost expert, I'll say. And so, having watched city government function now for the 20 plus years on and off that I've served in this position, things always go up. They never tend to come down. And the end result is that things go up for the consumer, and in a sort of a microcosm economy that we have, we just always voice concern about those things because we want the end product to be reasonably affordable. And I don't know that I have specific or will have specific thoughts about how we should proceed. I think we're in a good space. I understand that council wants to have this discussion, so we're back here. I don't know that we need at the immediate time any diversion from where we are currently, and would love to hear those who advocate for that, and we'll take that up. I think that's more of a political discussion for mayor and council. I think how we currently function, even with the escalating reclaimed rate that was adopted in July, is probably, best case scenario. So we'll see. I appreciate the good question, and I'll be back in front of you to continue the discussion.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
It's
you.
a complex issue. Marilyn, do we have another comment?
No.
I've got a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So a couple points. First off is, I really appreciate the participation from Mr. Galley and his team. And I think as we think through potential guidelines or directives for the future, having input from the chamber is really critical. So we'll come back to that. I think at one point we talked about putting together a working subcommittee to sort of maybe form up some of these issues for the October, November, December meetings. Hopefully tonight, maybe we could put the word out that we were looking for 2-3 people to get on that committee and can make that happen. Third thing is a question for Aaron in terms of the ins and outs, if you will, of the budget. There's sort of 1.1 coming in, and expenditures looked higher, if I remember correctly, in 23 and 24 or 22 and 23, but there was a pretty almost 3x outflow versus inflow, but then we automatically assume things are going to level off again. There we go. Thank you so much. So 24 was 3-to-1 in terms of out to in. 25 is projected to be 2-to-1 out to in, and then it levels off. Where does the shortfall come from, or how is it covered? So if we've got cash in of 1 million and we've got 3 million outflow, does that then get siphoned off of potable water? Let's just take 24 and for example. Is that $2 million gap roughly come out of the potable fund, or is it just a debt hole, or how does that work? I'm not sure I understand that, because I think as we all look forward, we want to be able to understand those mechanics. And then my last point, I think, is to something Mr. Galley said. You know, our discussion is not about changing what just got passed in rates. It's how do we handle this in the future? So the next time we take, at least that's my impression, when we take a look and open up the process for the next round of discussions around water, sewer, everything, that's when reclaim, we could maybe make some adjustments. But so Aaron, can you help me understand in 24, like what happened? How did we cover that 2 million? And this is 24, I get that. But
Hello, Water Commission. Rick Tatter, Management Services Director. To answer the question on the resources on this chart, we have a starting fund balance, a cash balance within the Reclaim Water Fund, which is a result of revenues that have been set aside for like capital projects and those types of commitments that we have. So that's just really drawing down on that fund balance that was planned. And we've received as of the beginning of fiscal year 24. So that's the purpose of that. It is not any influx of cash from other funds to help and support the Reclaim Water Fund. It does stand alone as an enterprise fund. I hope that answers the question on that.
it does, thank you. And I don't know if there's a chance for the upcoming discussions to get basically either a balance sheet and a cash flow snapshot of where we're at, just so people can understand how much there is in reserves, and we can sort of have that as a background piece. That'd be great. Thank you.
Rick, while you're still close to the microphone, I guess I was going to speak up, and I guess I'm addressing this to Aaron. As part of your process over the next few months, I think inevitably cost of service is going to come up as a topic. And I think we would all appreciate an education, perhaps from you, Rick, of how the Reclaimed Water Enterprise Fund is constructed and specifically what costs are allocated to the Reclaimed Water Enterprise Fund. We have heard various things about, or some of us are uncertain whether that's from the discharge pump downstream through the distribution system, or there's some allocation of wastewater treatment plant costs. And with those, there's certainly room for discussion on, policy discussions that would probably go to the council level of what costs they want to see reflected in the Reclaimed Water Enterprise Fund.
If you want that today, I can give.
No, not today.
Okay.
I'm
No,
thinking for the future.
Okay.
If you want to address it today, that's fine, but I'm thinking for the future,
Okay.
giving us a tutorial about how that works and how that is structured would be very helpful.
We'd be absolutely happy to do that, along with our finance team and the water services team, understanding where that separation of costs are. They also have a combined group of staff that allocate their time and resources specifically for reclaim versus their potable water side. There's some mathematics behind the scenes, but they try to stay whole as far as the enterprise fund, just the reclaim. But there's that spot that it becomes a reclaim cost versus a wastewater cost. And we can work together on that.
So just tacking on to that, Rick, for example, we heard Jolene talking about some regulation issues, and that's going to require staffing. Is that that shift in staffing time going to be accounted for, and maybe it's not that much, but I'm curious I would be really curious to see how that's broken down in a spreadsheet budget, just to understand it better.
Okay, we'll try to dig into that detail.
I was just bringing up here that Stantec, they did start a cost of service analysis for reclaimed water, but then we decided to just let it lie for now. So we do have some of that data in the report as well that is being finalized. So staff went through a whole exercise of splitting things out. I think it would be helpful for this discussion as a whole to know if the line where we draw for where reclaim starts the cost of reclaimed water starts, if that should be important to council, if that's a recommendation of you or not. Because we can spend a lot of time on it, but what if it's not relevant to the rate setting discussion? I don't know if I'm making sense. I just would hate to spend a lot of time arguing like where we draw that line. If maybe there are other things that are more important to embed in the rates, like some of these bigger capital projects, or I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply by my question that that's the sole area of interest, but to the degree that cost of service is, one pricing philosophy you could pursue as opposed to, the fixed fraction, the 35%, then the question very quickly becomes, well, what is the cost and what are we including in the costs? And honest people may differ on that. I mean, that's a policy decision. Whether you allocate some portion of the wastewater treatment plant costs or just take it from the distribution point down. I think that's a very important discussion. But certainly not the only discussion, but one among many that I think will be important to, an ultimate decision.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Aaron, I have a question, and I think this is Kurt. So, look, at the heart of this is a multi-factor, multi-variable challenge, right? Which is, I think, really amazing. I think one of the things that would be very helpful for all of us to understand is in 2025 with the new regulations that you were talking about, are those going to be specifically about the quality of reclaimed water, or which you could argue is just only a subset of what the sewage treatment plant has to put out? Or is it a shift in terms of the regulations are going to cover everything that the sewage treatment plant must now do this and take us to a new level for the sewage treatment? So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it's like there's reclaim that we use back in the community, and then water that we let go down Rio to Flag. Do you see a separation between those two things, or do you see the new regulations as everything that comes out of the plant has to look like X? I think once we understand that, it can help us set cost differentials, quality of service, quality of product differentials, right, between those two things. What's your thoughts on that in terms of what we're going to see in terms of regulations?
I'm going to I asked Jolene to come up to see if she wants to take a stab at answering your question, and then I'll see if I want to add anything.
Yeah, that's fine. So regulations, I'm assuming you're talking about the DPR new rules from ADQ, correct, Kurt?
Correct.
Okay.
This is the question. I'm a little confused in, is it going to be regulations around DPR only if you're going to do DPR? Or is it going to be a regulation that every sewage treatment plant now has to produce an output of X? Gotcha. Which to me are two different questions, and but I might be ignorant and not correct on that.
No, that helps, Kurt. So those rules are going to be only for if a plant or a municipality wants to do DPR. So those specific rules will center around if they want to go through that permitting process. Funny enough, though, there are actually regulations in process right now before the end of the year that will go into place that are going to change some of the aquifer water quality standards to match some of the drinking water standards. So those will actually be in place. So we will have a few more stringent standards by the end of the year that we will have to work into it'll be part of our APP, the Aquifer Protection Permit. So those we will have to adhere to, but the DPR ones we don't have to adhere to unless we want to do DPR. Does that answer your question?
No, very, very well. It does. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think it's important for us to understand then, as we look at everything that's going to come out of our plant today, based on its technology, we're going to have to do some upgrades. And then there's a portion that goes down Rio to Flag. There's a portion that we sell. And then the DPR, it sounds like to me, if the DPR discussion is kind of for later, if we have a major technology capital upgrade in the plant.
Don't go
But
too
there's
far,
things-
Jolene.
but we're gonna have to tackle some things now, is kind of what I'm hearing, yeah?
Yes, I think that that's what you're hearing. But also I think you are also wanting to go to, will A plus still be A plus in 10 years? Would we maintain a stream for the current outdoor users? Um, and we don't necessarily see that changing. We could still create different water qualities for different end uses.
Correct. And yeah, okay, I'll stop. We could go down a big rabbit hole right now. But yeah, you understand what info might be good for us to contemplate. And it sounds like there will be a differentiation between DPR at the next level versus kind of what every plant has to put out every day. So thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. And whether there ends up being an IPR, water quality for water to the aquifer, that has yet to be, implemented in Arizona. And I don't know that it's really being talked about at all. Other states have, but, so hopefully we've kind of painted that picture okay. And if we need to bring an expert in, there are plenty that wouldn't mind helping us with that from the consulting
Don's got a
field.
question. Don Bill's got a question.
Actually, a couple of questions for Aaron, and they're pretty similar to what we've been talking about already. First off, the relationship between um, current water quality standards for wastewater treatment plants for they're currently A plus water, essentially means, meets all drinking water standards. And that's what the city of Flagstaff produces typically for discharge to the Rio Flag. And then, as I understand it, the additional uh, increase in water quality standards ADEQ is working on relates specifically to direct potable reuse. And then I believe I heard you and or Jolene saying that there is going to be an additional standard of uh, reclaimed water discharge to streams related to how it impacts groundwater quality. Is that correct?
Thank you, sorry. It's not gonna be a separate one. It's gonna just be added on to what we already have as a permit for the APP for both plants, the aquifer protection permit. So what I was talking about is there's gonna be an addendum to that same permit with a couple extra constituents and a couple different levels of constituents. So it's not gonna be anything different than what we're already doing.
So I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but uh, what kind of changes are they looking at for uh, um, wastewater treatment plant discharge?
So the new rules that are gonna be in place that I was just talking about, the
Oh,
aquifer
yeah,
ones.
Aaron already mentioned PFAS.
Oh, yeah, they're looking to do those with this adoption with the new water quality standards that they're gonna tack on extra sampling to figure out about PFAS for plants, but there's not gonna be regulations put in place yet for that. But the new regulations, I remember there's gonna be like arsenic, I think a new level. There's gonna be the HAA5s, the halo aesthetic, I don't remember off the top of my head the whole word. And I think a different rule for coliforms. There were three other ones I can't remember off the top of my head that were new to wastewater that are brought in from drinking water.
Okay, thank you. I think that helps in my mind clarify that a little bit. The other question I had, this may be more for Aaron, it has to do with the charts that you were presenting and whether or not there's actually going to be, the city's actually going to have the capability to generate uh, treated effluent or reclaimed water for new additional customers. above and beyond the 70 that currently exist.
I'm sorry, Don, I was distracted for a second. So will there be additional water for more customers?
Well, yeah, it seemed to me that the charts that you were showing, there were some
Ah.
periods of the year where the amount of water that was produced was getting, pretty close to a limit in terms of being able to supply all the potential customers. And if in the future there is going to be a need for direct potable reuse or some other need for reclaimed water, is there going to be the capacity with the city of Flagstaff's wastewater treatment plants to meet those requests?
So we do have about 3,000 to 4,000 acre feet a year of water available. It's just, as you mentioned, when is that available? It's not available in the summer months. So to make, let's say we were to expand the system for water and toilets in, around Flagstaff, we would have to increase our storage significantly to deliver a level of service that meets the expectation of those users. They don't want to flush toilets and not have them refill. So we would have to have, almost as a robust reclaimed water delivery system as we have on the potable side. So it would be a significant investment to create enough storage in the summer months, unless our outdoor water users stopped using water as a way to, create water for indoor uses, let's say. So if we want to maintain current outdoor use with reclaim, there would have to be a substantial investment to for more direct delivered water. Or, on the DPR side, if we were to create a DPR plant, we wouldn't really have any water to run through it in the summer months, and that wouldn't be a great investment. We have to pencil all those sorts of things out. But yeah.
So I guess there could be a future need.
Oh, Kurt, you were going
No,
to add?
Well, I was just saying, or we work with the current clients too, to be more conservation minded during summer with different irrigation methodologies or whatever, right? I mean, you can free up supply to create supply for other uses. And that's maybe a point we talk about during the next few months.
And there could be a potential future need for developing some kind of offline reservoir storage for reclaimed water to be able to provide that water, shift that water use from when it's available to when it's needed. Winter, fall to summer months.
Correct. Yeah. And there have been some discussions about the inner basin, the 50 million gallon reservoir from 1900 or whenever that was constructed, maybe relining that, and that could be a significant storage for reclaimed water. So there are some ideas that we could discuss.
Thank you.
I moved to call that Lake Bills, by the way.
Chairman Riggleman, do we have enough information and discussion to then draft an agenda for the next meeting, or meet as a side committee? And we can try to recruit some more folks.
Yeah, I think I was going to suggest maybe we do a motion to have create sort of a working committee of three to sit down and think through, like, do we have enough information, or there are a few more pieces that we need, not 1,000, because we can't process all that. And then come back and say, our next meeting is to try to come back and take a look at some guiding principles. I would suggest that we ask all the commission members today that, if you could come up with 3 guiding principles, what would they be? We could submit those to Marion, and then the working group can kind of hash through that and put them in buckets and see if we make something. We can work that with you, Aaron, and Shannon as well. And then and even run that by Joe as the working committee. But I think the next thing would be to take nominations for that working group, and then we can get to work, but try to parse out some basic concepts in terms of information needed and next steps, and come back and pursue that. But if you don't think that's right, that's fine with me too.
I think that.
Or let me
that-
ask this, if any other commission members have thoughts on A, sort of identifying a short list of data points that would be very helpful. B, getting a team of 3 of us as a working group subcommittee, and C, sitting down with the water services team to hash through some of this and put some logical pieces together for consideration in October. But I would like to survey all the commission members in terms of make it 3, which are 3 guiding principles that you think, if any, they may say don't have any, that's fine too. But what would you think are important things to do on that? So. Any
I'm sorry,
commissioners have?
Kurt, this is Rob. I'm not quite sure I followed that. Are you asking for us to provide offline, the 3 guiding principles we would suggest?
Yeah,
Or
well, that's one action. Yeah, so I think there's an action for somebody out there to make a motion that we create a working group, let's call it 3 people, to work with the department, subcommittee. That's one action. Second action is, I think every commissioner should pause and take a moment and think about what are 3 potential guiding principles. I always like to work in 3s. I don't know why, but what 3 things do you think would be guiding principles in terms of how to look at rate use and rates of reclaimed water in the future? And then the working group can take all those in and say, okay, there's really 3 themes here, or 4 or 5 themes, and we can look at that and then come back and report on that as we start to put together these guiding principles for October, right? That'd be a great way to tee up the October discussion. We did a survey. Here's what everybody came back with. We really think it sort of boils down to these 4 or 5 things, right? So that would be the second action. The third action is, if any commissioner thinks there is a specific data point from staff and or the city that would be helpful in looking at this, whether it's about a regulatory issue or a financial issue, or I think one of the things you asked for is help me where we draw the line today in terms of the enterprise fund. I'm going to call it enterprise fund, but also what's the income statement for the enterprise fund? I think that's something we understand, right? So those 3 things.
I'd just like to make a comment that I think we have an immediate decision to make, or one to make in the near future, on how to set rates in the near future. But the long-term situation is we need to know a lot about a lot of factors in terms of supply of fresh water to make a decision about ultimately where reclaimed water is going. For example, if Red Gap Range, we know the cost is high to develop that resource. If that's not possible, then DPR is the near and intermediate future for Flagstaff, and that will change the price structure of how we use reclaimed water, I think. And I would suggest that we need to look at summer usage and how we change the way we use water in the summer to make DPR possible as a annual resource that you use 12 months out of the year. So in the long term, we've got a lot of things to address to make a decision about reclaimed water. I mean, that's just from my perspective. There's a lot of nuances to all this, but.
Yeah, John, I think that's an excellent point, and that's what that is, to me, sounds like would be an excellent guiding principle in the sense that if it becomes apparent that Red Gap Ranch is going to be economically infeasible or extremely expensive, then we should be looking at reclaimed water as the next water source versus Red Gap Ranch. And the implications of that then are XYZ, right? And that's something that we can come up with as a pivot point, but we're not gonna know that in the next 2 years or 3 years. So have a discussion. But I guess I think right now an immediate action would be if I get one of the commissioners to make a motion that we set up a working group consisting of 3 of the commissioners to work with staff.
This is Rob. I make a motion, as you described, that the Water Commission should form a subcommittee of 3 members to pursue this topic offline and bring recommendations back to the group for discussion, open discussion at October and the other future meetings.
Do I hear a second? Or actually, sorry, John, that's your job.
Do we have a second?
I would
oh.
second, but I would also appreciate input from some of the commission members that aren't here. And I don't know if we can get that in time for the next meeting or not. But, you know, as part of the second, I'd be willing to be one of the members of that ad hoc committee.
Okay, Mac,
Sorry to interrupt. I believe Marion said that there cannot be a motion on this item right now.
The agenda lists this as an informational item, not to make an emotion. That wasn't recorded, so.
Good point. Ouch, sorry. I hate it when Robert's Rules of Order get in the way. Barry, can we do that during the information to from?
No.
Okay.
Informational is just information that's not
Right,
really,
okay.
we don't have anything on the agenda about that or
Okay,
listed as a topic.
Okay, that's my mistake. I thought we could make a motion within, even though we weren't voting for something, I thought we could make a motion. So I stand corrected. I apologize.
We could recommend as part of the minutes to create a subcommittee, but not a motion. An agreement.
Well, recommend or by consensus.
Not sure, but just to say that the commission agreed to coordinate a subcommittee to, and I can put that on the agenda, but not as a recommendation.
Marion, when I look at the agenda, item D is reclaimed water rate options for consideration. And then on the sheet that we were given, among other things, it says vote on a recommended option or options to forward on to city council. That sounds like more than information to me.
Aaron, is that what you intended?
I didn't necessarily intend for a vote tonight, but I don't know if Shannon maybe added that or Kurt. I'm sorry.
If you haven't seen it, I can show it to you.
Yeah, I'll come take a look at it.
You know, at a minimum, if it doesn't break any city rules or other rules for public meetings like this, it seems like we should be able to.
Yeah, it looks like the staff summary does say that it is a vote on a recommendation, so I guess we could.
Yeah, I apologize. I do not
Erin?
remember that being part of my staff summary. So something happened, and Kurt, I'll leave it up to you if
So Aaron,
you
I
want to take it.
yeah, Aaron, don't apologize. Thank you very much for putting that in there. So our recommendation is that we form a subcommittee of 3 people. So that's fine. I think that fits within the parameters of what we're doing because we do want to put more thought on this before we go to city council. So I would go back to that. John, I would suggest that you go back to that and I would put forward the motion that we create a subcommittee of 3 that works with commissioners, works with the Chamber of Commerce, works with as many people as we can to think through this concept and work with staff.
I would second that.
Any discussion? And how do you vote?
This is Rob. Yes, aye.
Yes.
Kurt is aye.
Yes. I too. So it's unanimous. We will form a subcommittee.
Thank you so much for helping us through that exercise. And now we can turn it over to Mac here. Thank you.
I'll just add one little tidbit this. I think the major users of reclaimed water should be included in the discussion to get their ideas and how we can best make changes to the reclaimed water system to accomplish the city's goals and do the best thing for the public. So.
Before we move on to the next topic, Kurt, are you wanting to name the members of this commission, or are we going to poll the wider group of commission members?
Yeah, I think we can pull the wider group and see who wants to be involved, and then we can come back with a recommendation. Yeah, I wouldn't do it right now. I think we can pull it in.
Okay, I'll give you feedback now. I heard Don say he'd like to be a member, and I also would like to be a member, just for your reference.
Understood. Understood. Yeah, we'll do a quick, with Marion's help, we'll do the correct polling and then be able to come back and nominate people and then get moving. So thank you.
All right. I think we'll move on to item E, required language change to the regional plan. And I guess Mac will be speaking for Shannon Jones.
That's correct. So Mac McNamara, Water Services Engineering Section Director. I'm joined by Sarah Dector, our Comprehensive and Neighborhood Planning Manager. Before I start, I believe our city manager wanted to have a few words. If that's correct, I can give him the floor.
I think you're muted. Nothing yet. We change anything to hear him yet, or?
Greg, are you able to hear us?
Okay.
I didn't know if you wanted to say a couple words. We weren't able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry for the glitch. I do have some comments on this, but with your permission, Chair, I think we can go ahead and let Mac and Sarah kick it off. I would like to share some comments at a very high level on this topic at some point. I don't know that it needs to start the discussion, though.
Okay, thank you. Mac?
All right, thank you. So today we have, Sarah and I have a short presentation on the regional plan modification. That modification is related to the urban growth boundary. We'd ask that we have comments, questions, discussion after the presentation so we can get through it With that, I'll hand it off to Sarah to take care of the first handful of slides here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having Mac and I for this joint presentation. If you have been following along with the regional plan update, which I know Don and some other members of the commission have, we've been working on several iterations of an updated regional plan. And we are currently at the point where, sorry, I got this all phased in. We are at the point where we have had a first complete draft created, and we have sent it to the regional plan committee for review. They are meeting next week, or I'm sorry, about a week and a half to endorse the document and send it out for a 60-day public review. I told Mac, because Mac's an engineer, I like to break it down in how we look at our plans in engineering. And so this is really the 30% plan that we have available over the next few weeks. And the next version is when we get into 50%. So we're still refining and working, but we really have worked through all the chapters, materials, and talked through the integration of all the issues. And that is where we stand today. So we are here a little earlier than the board and commission input that we're looking for overall from all the boards and commissions, because there's a particular issue associated with how we treat the urban growth boundary that we'd like to get your input on in advance of the regional plan committee considering this for endorsement. So the city's general plan by state statutes required to have a couple things that are required by the legislation that was passed in the mid-2000s. But the city of Flagstaff has included water management and water demand and water resources in the general plan for the city for much longer than that. So even prior to 2001, there was an urban service boundary. I think Aaron looked up the ordinance, and it was from sometime in the 90s. In the 80s even. So we've been talking about how we manage demand both geographically and with our system for a long time. So in 2001, when we passed the Regional Land Use and Transportation Plan, which are our first joint plan with the county and surrounding areas, we took that service boundary and established it as an urban growth boundary that had two phases. If you were around to remember, there was a rural area and an urban area, kind of a phase 1 and a phase 2. When we adopted the Regional Plan 2030, we combined those two boundaries, and Mac will show you a map of what that looks like. And we created a little bit of a higher bar to changing it. So we went with the wider boundary and said, if you change this boundary, it's a major plan amendment. And so for the last about 10 years, since this plan was adopted in 2014, that's been a prerequisite for any properties outside the urban growth boundary to be considered if they wanted to receive water services. And the regional plan policy we currently have is at the top of the screen. It's that development requiring public utility services will be located in the urban growth boundary. That's a very rare will. There are not a lot of other wills or shalls in the plan. The plan is a policy document after all. And we are looking to discuss what kind of flexibility we may want to consider. Maybe we were too hot and then too cold, and we're trying to find out what is actually the most appropriate fit for that interim and long-term look at our water resources. So we have this draft policy. We've sent it to the committee. Something different we're doing in this plan is we also have what we call guidelines, and these guidelines are written for staff. So they don't apply until staff actually implements them, but they're our intent, and we want to make sure that that's really clear. So I'm going to hand it back to Mac and let him talk a little bit more about the urban growth boundary, and we'll put this policy back up again at the end, so don't feel like you have to memorize it. We'll come back to it and discuss it further. Thank you, Mac.
Thanks, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned, we put this map together just for a visual aid to kind of help describe what we're talking about and what we're looking at right now. If you take a look, you can see the city limits are in red, the large bold right outside. And a lot of portions inside the city limits are in blue in the urban growth boundary. A couple things that are of interest or of note here. There are some large land masses that are outside the urban growth boundary, but inside the city limits. Some other things on here that are really difficult to see on here is we have several county islands that they are within the urban growth boundary. They're within the city limits. They may be problematic and may be very challenging to annex them, but they do border water and sewer mains. Some other things too, we have transmission mains running north outside of the urban growth boundary, outside of the city limits. So water infrastructure is there. There are some grandfathered distribution lines to the south, heading down 89. So there is some available infrastructure outside the urban growth boundary, outside the city limits.
Mac, before you go on, could you say one more time what the red and the blue lines are?
Yes, so red is city limits and the blue is the urban growth boundary.
Can you define that term a little more? Again, for someone who hasn't dealt with that before?
Yeah, so I guess what we're talking about today and why the urban growth boundary matters is the current policy does not let us extend water services outside that urban growth boundary unless there is a major plan amendment. I don't think you can do a minor. Is it just a major plan amendment? So that's why that line is important.
Okay, as a neophyte to this, I was just surprised that that urban growth boundary is inside the city limits. I would have thought you could have extended services up to the city limits without question, but I gather that's not the case.
No, you're correct. That is not. We get further slides. There are some reasons why the urban growth boundary is the way it is. And a lot of that is to control growth, direct growth. But we can get to that here in just a second. Yeah, no problem. So of course, then into the why. So what we talked about before a little bit, the current policy is somewhat absolute. We would like the flexibility to provide water services outside the urban growth boundary if the circumstance works. If it's beneficial to the ratepayers, to the city, and the regional water supply, we'd like that flexibility to take a second look at that development, or that's where that source needs to go. Below, we've listed a couple of reasons that we think could potentially benefit the community, ratepayers, and the regional water supply. I'll just cruise through a couple here. So we could potentially have fewer people drilling wells. Reduction of traffic and carbon emissions caused by water hauling. We do have a good amount of water hauling, and those water haulers are taking water from our load out stations from our aquifer and driving outside city limits with that. The potential for improved fire protection. We could be placing fire hydrants on mains, extending them out further past the urban growth boundary. There could also be fire suppression sprinkler systems that we could supply with our water mains in buildings outside the urban growth boundary. Another one is capturing more wastewater, produce more reclaim. So right now, if you were to haul water out, we don't get that back and aren't able to use that as reclaim. Next one, collecting capacity fees from people who have not bought in to the system. And it goes back to hauling water. And the last one here that I just want to touch is potential enforcement of conservation measures. So if somebody goes and drills a well into the same aquifer that we're using for our city system, they would be under like a voluntary conservation measure. We don't have any regulation over that. And I'm assuming the same goes for water hauling.
Mac, you could almost add one other thing to that list. The more people we get off septic systems, the less chance we have to contaminate the aquifer, and the more reclaimed water you can make, like you said.
Sure. Yeah. And there are concerns with environmental hazards with old septics that are failing. And I think we do have some cases within these county islands, within the city limits, where septics are failing.
Your third bullet from the last, the capacity fees. So is the assumption that you would, if you did extend service to some of these groups or areas, you would collect connection fees?
Yes.
Just as if it was a
Capacity
new.
fees. Yes.
Okay.
The other comment in decision making with regard to this is, would affordable housing be a part of the process and making decisions about where we extended services to.
Yeah, I think it could be. I think our decision process probably needs to be refined and how we're making those decisions, but yeah, that could be one element. And then to the other side too, is potential conflicts within the regional plan if we were to change the policy language. So like we said before, there is intention of why the urban growth boundary is why it is and how, how the border has been drawn. So there's a 20% reduction in housing costs compared to today. Greater use of walking, biking, and transit if we do more infill and create a denser environment. Reduction of regional vehicle miles traveled. That goes back to the density and keeping growth within the urban growth boundary. Reduce the wildland urban interface risks. And then help manage long-term maintenance and operation costs by not creating fewer new facilities in outlining areas. And what that kind of goes to is, I mean, we expect, so if a new development comes online, they would be responsible for paying for that distribution infrastructure. If there's not enough ratepayers for that infrastructure, those rates may not pay for the operation, maintenance, and replacement of that line. But something we would look at as a case-by-case scenario as those came in. And then we're back to discussions, questions. The language that Sarah had pointed out to our recommended change is down below. And then as Sarah mentioned before, this will go back through the Regional Planning Committee on September 30th. So we're open to questions, discussion.
So the specific modified policy you're asking for a comment on is the modification of the language to allow extension to the urban growth boundary.
Yeah, and I can go ahead and read those, I guess, for the record too. There's two that are in bold that are insignificant. The first one is not to extend water and sewer services beyond the urban growth boundary unless an analysis shows the service can be provided without impacting the availability of water to property owners already within the boundary. The second one is not to extend water services without sewer to maintain the ability to recycle and use reclaimed water.
Do we have any other questions from the commission? Do we have a comment?
Yes, we do have a public comment. Another online.
Me, this is David
we-
Haywood. You guys hear me? Do I have you guys there? Hello, guys. I'm unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything from your end. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and take public comment while we're working on this?
Mr. Chair, this is Greg Clifton. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
I'd like to offer a comment, and I don't really construe it as a public comment, but rather an addition to the staff presentation that has just occurred. I certainly consider myself staff. Is that okay?
You betcha.
Thank you. I want to thank both Sarah and Mac for framing the discussion, and I think it is an opportune time for me to jump in and offer some pretty high-level comments. I am not a part of the regional plan committee, but I've been reading the minutes and kind of getting a little bit of the play-by-play. I guess I'll editorialize a bit and say I'm not sure that I agree with some of the underlying concepts that are now being embodied within this draft, notably, and it's already been mentioned, the idea of having urban growth boundaries within the corporate boundaries of the city. Not too used to seeing that in regional plans, and it begs a lot of questions. And quite clearly if it was passed that way, would present a conflict in terms of stifling or curtailing the city from providing services to citizens within its corporate boundaries, residents within its corporate boundaries. I see a head-on conflict in that regard. So I think it's something we should be mindful of. But I think the questions before this commission, the input that's being solicited is about water and water utilities. So that would include wastewater and other water components beyond the urban growth boundary. And as I understand it, and the reason I'm weighing in is there's some notion that that should be an absolute prohibition that would basically handcuff this council and future councils, this commission and future commissions from taking any action that would allow for the extension of city utilities beyond an urban growth boundary, even if in many instances they would still be within the corporate boundaries of the city. It's very troubling, I think, to have that arrangement. In my profession, having served a number of communities and having dealt with urban growth boundaries in all of them, the plans have always allowed a little bit of flexibility to the decision makers, in this case, the commission and the council, to allow for those extensions to occur when it's in the community's best interest that they do occur. Most frequently, the scenario I see, and we've had this in Flagstaff recently, is one whereby the city is being asked to solve a problem. The problem is one that already exists, and it's one where the connection to the city water utility would effectively help resolve the issue, whether it be water, and we've heard reference to failing wells, a common scenario. It could be on the other end, failing septics on the wastewater side. It could be a number of things. We see those things happen in real life. And with the city operating the utility, the onus comes to the city to help resolve problems. And it's not to suggest that the city should be one giant problem solver and correct all the issues out there in and around its urban growth boundaries. But it is to suggest that absent the city being the operator of the utility does not provide those remedial measures, other alternatives will necessarily arise. And they may not be in the community's interest over time. The formation of water companies, water districts, or wastewater companies and wastewater districts, package plants for wastewater, all these things. There's a myriad of options that could materialize in these scenarios because, frankly, the problems aren't just going to disappear. The houses or structures aren't just going to go away. Other avenues will be pursued. I think the best laid plans as policy statements have a little bit of flexibility to address the unforeseen or the unanticipated things that will come along over time. It's a given that they will come along. That's not an assumption. That is something that will happen. And again, we've had some experiences in Flagstaff to illustrate that point. So I find this discussion very, very important. I am troubled by a draft regional plan that purports to lock down urban growth boundaries within the corporate boundaries of the city in a fashion that would not allow for any of the decision makers, any of the policy makers to deviate from that. And in the interest of growth management, which is the underlying premise behind an urban growth boundary, I think there needs to be a certain trust placed upon our decision makers to make the right decisions and not to do things that are going to go counter to the intention of the urban growth boundaries, meaning not providing unchecked extension of our utilities that would in turn promulgate all kinds of unchecked growth. That's not the idea here. And I think that the issues that I have seen in this and other jurisdictions that have come about where the requests were made to extend utilities have not at all been about increasing growth, but have rather been about resolving problems and correcting things where the city is best positioned to do so. I think as stewards of the resource, it's incumbent upon us to be a part of those discussions. And I think as representative government at the local level, it's incumbent upon our decision makers to have the ability to make those decisions. So this isn't truly a staff issue. It's one that I think lies largely upon our elected body and their appointed commissioners as we wrestle with policy to have the ability to make the good decisions when those conditions arise, and they will arise. I thank you for letting me weigh in on this. I hardly ever, I think I might have just lost the connection. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I promise to conclude here. Where was I? Train of thought. I don't weigh in too much on the matters in front of the commission. I do thank you for the hard work that you do for the city. I think this is an important discussion and one that the commission should give some careful attention to. And thank you again to Sarah and Mac for framing the discussion.
Thank you for following the discussion. Really appreciate that.
We do have public comments.
Okay, let's take.
Joe is first. 3 minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Joe Galley, again, 101 West Route 66, Senior Advisor for Public Policy at the Greater Flagstaff Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to, again, get on record on this key issue. We did have staff, including Mac and others from Water Services, and Sarah Dector with our Business Advocacy Division this morning at the Chamber on this particular topic as well, getting an update, seeing this language, and are grateful for the staff time that were provided and engaged on this particular issue. I really couldn't speak to the issue any better than the city manager from the business community's perspective. We're in full agreement. These types of decisions related to utility services really belong at the elected official level, and so. Again, I'm not well spoken on this like our city manager, but I'm here to encourage you, to encourage mayor and council through staff to continue this discussion on having flexibility in the policy document, the regional plan that comes forward. We're encouraged by this. We think it's a good step, and we want to see this continue. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate it. We have another comment, I believe.
Yes, Diane?
Hi, my name's Diane Bosick, and I appreciate you discussing this topic tonight. I represent the Wildcat Ridge Homeowners Association. It's an 80-acre subdivision that's just north of the Elks Club and just south of Lockett Ranches. And most people aren't aware of our existence at all. But we recently were asked to allow the new waterline project to go through our neighborhood, and the phase 4 piece of it came right through our neighborhood. But unfortunately, because of this policy, we couldn't get water. And so we have pipes running right up our meadow. But when we were successful with the city and talking about putting taps in, but it seemed a little absurd. And we're just this little notched out area. To our east is the urban growth boundary is there, and there are people in the urban growth boundary, same to our west, but we were just notched out. And so this would have been extremely helpful to our subdivision if this policy were in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for making us aware of that.
Fuller Barnes. My wife and I have property in that subdivision. And just as what Diane had said, this would have been a wonderful opportunity. We were very fortunate to get hydrants in there, and we haven't built there yet. However, the opportunity to be able to get water or sewer or anything would be much appreciated. And the new water line is in, and it would be very beneficial, I think, to everybody in there, I think, who's very, who would love to have that. So I just wanted to put that input in as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments that we have? One online, okay. For the person online, could you're up if you can make your comments now.
Sure thing. This is David Haywood, 3325 North Antler Crossing. That's in Flagstaff, per my postal address, but not within the city limits. I am in a similar situation to Diane and Fuller, very close to one of those transmission lines, but not able to get water. However, I'm not here on that basis today. I'm here, I would say, not as a representative perhaps of the regional plan committee, but due to my involvement in the regional plan committee and those policymaking discussions. And I think, that there are two things that do really concern me. One is to echo our city manager's concern that we are potentially not providing services to folks who live within our municipal boundaries. Would we consider a situation in which we wouldn't provide fire services, police services, access to our schools, to those same folks, who are of course taxpayers? And I think the other concern for me, working through the regional plan, is I would really like growth discussions to be undertaken by those folks responsible for those issues within City Hall, right? So those are planning discussions, and have those separated from technical and service level discussions about what's best for our water system. It feels like those two things have been blended, and Sarah mentioned some of the history behind those, that kind of one was just, we took one thing in terms of this service boundary and just kind of copied and pasted it into something else, making it this urban growth boundary. And the two should not necessarily be the same. We need to make growth decisions based on sensible growth principles, and water management decisions based on sensible water management issues. So that's something I'm hoping to continue to discuss with our group. But I hope if you guys are able to vote and you have a quorum, moving forward with this more flexible language will definitely kind of allow us to push the conversation in that direction. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Appreciate it. Any other comments? Okay, Mac, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, so I guess I have a question here. So we came today for support. I don't believe we have a quorum anymore. Are we back to a quorum? Okay. Yeah, so I guess now that we do have a quorum, our question.
I'm on. This is Kurt. We have quorum.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess what we're asking now is if there is support from the Water Commission or not. Sure. I'll let Sarah hop in here too.
And just to clarify what we're looking for, we're not looking for your definitive once and for all answer. What we're looking for support on is putting this more flexible language in the 60-day public review draft so that the community can have a discussion about it. We've heard from a few people here. There are definitely other people I know who may want to weigh in on this. The committee is going to want to weigh in on it. And so we want to make sure it has that robust discussion of what is the right amount of flexibility. Another key thing to know is that these implementation guidelines are a lot like the guiding principles that the commissioner was mentioning earlier, which is that they won't automatically go into effect. The water services will need to update the water services policies, which is where they will get into the more detailed balancing and decision making. There's always going to be a balance between having consistency in our decision making and the right amount of flexibility. And so there'll be a kind of phase 2, even if this language ends up in the plan, that of course will come to the Water Commission in your role. Is that good?
Yeah.
I think from my point of view, I would support investigating a lot more flexibility in how decisions are made. I don't think I know enough to really say definitively where this is going to end up. I'd like to make sure I get a copy of your PowerPoint from today. So Marilyn, if you could send that to the commissioners. Other comments?
I found the comments of the city manager and the other folks who testified to be quite compelling. And so I am in support of adopting the more flexible language or placing it in the document for review.
John, this is Kurt. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So ultimately, look, we need living documents, not codes. We need to have people that we put in power make decisions on the best best behalf of our constituents. So I support this.
Any other comments? Okay, is there anything else we need to do with this issue? Okay. I don't think this is just a voice support here, and we're not actually voting
I
on
don't
this
believe
issue.
it's a vote, just support and direction.
Yeah, I don't think we can vote on it, actually. All right, we'll move on to item number 6. Any old business that needs to be brought up at this point? Okay, hearing none. Any informational items to the chair, commission members, or staff? Hearing none. Going once, going twice. I adjourn this meeting at 6:34.
Thanks, everybody.